My advice to men my age who are becoming fathers is to find a project that you can do while holding your baby, which you're going to be doing a lot of the time. So maybe find a really long box set, or find a video game that you can play basically one-handed, ideally single player. A friend of mine plays artillery in World of Tanks, but for this time around I decided to have a long campaign of Crusader Kings II, where I thought I'd conquer the world, but also make it as modern and progressive and advanced as possible, with the highest possible development everywhere. What exactly being advanced might mean different things to different people, but generally speaking, I'm going by what sort of politics and laws would you want to have by the end of the Middle Ages, and then as you move into, say, the Victoria III timeline eventually of the modern age. So in Crusader Kings 2, there's a bunch of different governments. There's nomadic, which is the most kind of wild and fairly low level. That's not to say that they don't have culture and things like that, but certainly their economy is going to be very basic. They're going to be subsisting off herding and so on and so forth. So nomadic, fairly low level. Slightly above the nomads are the tribes, who are, to be fair, settled agrarian societies, but still they're fairly low level. They don't have much technological progress. They probably don't have much writing, if at all, not much money. They're not going to have a sort of market economy that drives development. So tribes, maybe a little bit better than nomads, but still not great. So you probably wouldn't want to have a tribal world. And then, of course, when you reform out of a tribe, the main thing that, of course, Crusader Kings II and the rest of the series is about is the feudal system. Fair enough, some kings there. But feudalism is certainly better, I would say, than the tribal and the nomadic governments, but it's not great. Feudal rulers are good at inbreeding, getting long chins and that sort of thing, but developing the economy and technology and that sort of thing is not particularly great unless you have a constitutional monarchy or something like that. So yes, feudalism is certainly an improvement, and the various other types like the imperial government are an improvement over tribes. But I would say probably the best kind of government that you can hope for, that you can actually play in a CK2, is a merchant republic. They have cities, they have developed trades, a developing economy and that sort of thing. So clearly that's better for modernizing and for building up development and that sort of thing. There are downsides. It's not a perfect democracy, of course. We would want a fairly democratic level of government. There are only 5 families that are eligible for election in a merchant republic as modeled in the game, and as we'll see, when I do become one, I'll be basically rigging the elections so that my family wins every time. So not a perfect system of government, but probably I would say the best. If you want to have the most advanced and modernizing type of government in a world conquest, I would say merchant republics are the way to go. And so my thought was to start as a tribe. Now this is, of course, not the historical world, but this is a randomly generated one. I just felt like playing in a slightly different world here in the 768 start. So we do have a very different world with randomly generated religions and that sort of thing. But I thought I'd start as a tribal king and then reform into a merchant republic as a means of developing the world, as I say. Jumping ahead close to the end of the run, you can see that indeed I will eventually have reformed to merchant republic, of course. But when you're this large, you will typically be an emperor title, and you will have subordinates who are kings, and often those are feudal kings, of course. So we can see indeed, if we look here, we have a feudal king who is a vassal of my grand prince. But that's, as we said, not very good. It's not good to have kings. What we would prefer to then have is, instead of feudal vassals like this, is we can actually just have a bunch of king level republican, so city, effectively burgher vassals, like this guy, for example, which you can do by, if you have a normal city somewhere. If we were to someday give this guy a county, he would then become a grand mayor. You could give him then a duchy to become a republic, or just give him a kingdom title straight away, and he would become a prince mayor, like, say, this fellow. So instead of having a bunch of vassal kings, I think it would be better to have a bunch of prince mayors as vassals. You can tell that they're Republican, that is to say, they are elected because they have these pink ribbons around their portrait as opposed to the blue that is strictly kings. So in addition to being a merchant republic, conquering the world in the sense of being the only state, then all the king level vassals should be then Republican. As such, that means that there would be, since we're the only sovereign nation in the world, or at least in Crusader Kings II world, and since there would be no kings as such, just prince mayors, that means we'd effectively abolish kings. And that would be, in my view, much more progressive as an end state for this campaign than having feudalism. So the end goal of this campaign then would be to try and revoke all the feudal kingdoms and give them to mayors. And the way to do that, you can't revoke as a merchant republic directly without good cause. So you have to try and catch your kings plotting against you, or perhaps use intrigue to manufacture some evidence that they were supposedly plotting against you. You can do that for any feudal vassal, of course. Then you can try and arrest them, and ideally you want to have them not be arrested, to rebel against you in response if they're a direct vassal. That's happened here. They'll rebel, you can then beat them. So this feudal duke, I've found him scheming, or I've perhaps manufactured the evidence for him scheming, tried to arrest him. He's raised a rebellion. He's rebelling here in the Canaries or in the Balearics, and I've gone to war, sieged him down. I'm now ready to peace out, at which point he'll be locked away in jail. I can then revoke his titles because he's a traitor. I can revoke his duchy and, let's say, one of his counties. Then what I can do, so now I've revoked Majorca here. Of course, he has a castle there, but what I can do is I can find one of the mayors there. I can grant him that county. He's now a Lord Mayor. He's got a whole county. And then I can grant him, say, that duchy, making him a now Grand Mayor. There you go. So in this way, you can replace all of your kings with Grand Mayors. Indeed, you could imagine a situation, assuming you agree with me, that it would be better to have elected city mayors rather than the landed rural aristocracy, which is what the feudal system is, right? If you agree with me, you could, in theory, replace everyone from count and above with mayors, which would be a difficult playthrough. So I recommend that for some really keen CK2 player. There's a challenge run for you. Have no feudal, tribal, or nomad above the level of a baron. In practice, that's kind of difficult to do for several reasons. Firstly, if you have king level mayors, they don't manage their subjects very well, so they do give out a bunch of titles to feudal vassals, which is not great. You also, when you're conquering nomad lands here, like these ones, that cause them to become a tribe, and then those tribes reform into feudal. So the least worst option there is to have, see if I can find one. I think this title was recently reformed from a it was conquered from a nomad and then reformed into a feudal system. So it's not ideal, but at least we can have no king level vassals. This playstyle has some interesting implications for the actual world and the society that would be formed in this way. So for example, usually when you have a king, of course, what that means is that you have a bunch of claimants. When the king dies, there's a bunch of people that are going to vie to become the next king based on if it's a son or if it's a close relative and so on. And of course, you know, if this was if this wasn't one of my vassals, what I could do is I could try and invite one of those claimants over, make them a vassal, press their claim, and then I'd end up conquering the whole kingdom that way in one go. And so that's not great. It means that there's succession wars, civil wars, and that sort of thing, which is not great for my goal of having a super modernized world. But if we look at, so if we have a recently conquered republic here, if I can find one. So this guy, for example, this kingdom level title used to be just an ordinary feudal Icta kingdom. And so even though the guy here in charge is a mayor, there's still a bunch of claimants who could theoretically come and claim the throne and become feudal. But their claims, as you can see, they typically are not inherited by the successors of the characters. So eventually, when all the direct claimants die, what ends up happening is you get a mayorship like this, perhaps. So here, for instance, this kingdom level title, this Most Serene Republic, has no claimants. It used to be a feudal kingdom. There used to be lots of claimants. It used to be inherited and so on. But eventually, I gave it to a mayor. All the claimants died out, and now this guy is the only, or being elected is the only legitimate way to become mayor of this kingdom. And that sort of implies that in the society that's being portrayed here, they don't accept a king coming along. The idea of electing a new leader has been so entrenched that they're not going to accept any claimants that just come along, unless there's some sort of coup or someone manufactures a claim. But in the normal state of affairs, this is now a well-established democratic sort of republic as part of the whole empire, which again is probably a good thing in terms of its development and that sort of thing. As I say, you don't want to have feudalism if you can avoid it. So that is the political system. Ideally, we have lots of lord mayors and prince mayors above them, and then the grand prince sitting above them in turn, having lots of things like trade routes, big cities built up, and so on and so forth. The other dimension to CK2 is the religious aspect. So this is, as I say, a randomized world, although you have like a randomized ERE with a sort of randomized other religions that are like Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and so on. So the question is, what is the most advanced and modernizing idea from the religious point of view? Of course, all the religions in this fictional history are made up. Different, of course, interpretations based upon your own personal philosophy. I think, though, if you look at it through the ideal situation you'd have in something like Victoria 3, the best way to go is to reform pagan. So there are 4 options you can have. I've picked a random pagan here, the anvil type. You need to take 3 holy sites. So early on in the game, this is the earliest save actually I have. I've just gone to snipe 3 of the holy sites to have them, 1 here, and so on. And so in terms of reforming, I think there's several different options, but I think in terms of making it as modern as possible, I would pick cosmopolitan, which kind of means the sort of cultural acceptance type deal that you have, the some of the more advanced cultural options in Victoria 3 for laws. It means that there's sort of acceptance of different religions and cultures. For the doctrines, I definitely think that the equality one is the best. That's sort of like your women's suffrage in Victoria 3. And that is, as far as I know, the only way to get female rulers in a merchant republic in CK2. And it does just generally already allows you to start leveraging the sort of talents of female commanders, female leaders, and that sort of thing. With the merchant republic, you can elect the character with the best stats, so you can then select whether it's a male or female character. You can then select the one with the best stats, kind of like a really meritocracy. For the other doctrine, there are a few good choices, but I would say that astrology is the best. Firstly, from the point of view of stellar observations, which should drive science at this early year, but also it lets you have access to the Hermetic Society, which is a big boost to learning and therefore tech spread and that sort of thing. So I think for the tech spread, astrology is the best option, although there are some other good ones in the doctrine. Leadership, so this is where you get to pick, do you have popes or do you have the king also be the religious leader? And from a kind of power maxing, probably the temporal is the best idea, where your king is also the head of religion. But from a sort of modernizing view, I think autonomous, where you have no major religious leaders, that sort of allows that kind of competition of ideas. It means there's never going to be a pope that burns you to death for thinking the earth is round or whatever. And so this overall was the reformed religion that I chose. This then lets you reform into a merchant republic as well, which is what I ended up doing here in 792. Overall then, I started, and the first few years I went for trying to reform the religion. So I went for some of the holy sites here in Europe, and I started expanding down here into Spain, starting in the historic sort of England region. That let me raid different places. There's the ERE version in this world, which have lots of raidable coasts, and down here there's also feudal kingdoms and that sort of thing that I'm raiding at the moment. So a bit of raiding, a bit of reforming, and just getting going here in the early years. Jumping ahead a little bit, after reforming and going into a merchant republic, I took it slowly and expanded down south here. I tried to avoid these mega tribal lands, because as a merchant republic, it's actually kind of useless conquering them until you can reform them into feudal at least, because you can't really get very much out of the pure tribes. So much better to go down here where they're already the more advanced government types, which is what I did. I also just thought it was funny because this guy just looks like a Matt Berry character or something. Anyway, the big problem I had is that normally when you are dealing with tribes, they're strong, they can mobilize a lot of troops, but they have that gavelkind or partible inheritance, meaning that if they have two of the same title, they'll split when they die. But that's, funnily enough, not the case here. In this random world, it just worked out that these pagan religions gave you the succession type that basically is tribal but not partible. So for example, this guy has several kingdoms, and as you can see, he has his eldest daughter set to inherit all of them. So due to the randomized way, the major nerf of tribal kingdoms didn't actually happen here, and so it ended up being quite a big blob here of tribal multi-kings effectively, and it was fairly tricky to break that up. You can see, even though this guy has only a few K personal levies, the tribes can raise a ton of their vassals, so they can potentially get 38,000 vassal ally troops. So fighting this big blob actually turned out to be quite tricky. This is kind of why I'm still expanding south. I've taken this duchy here, including Marrakesh, which I'm keeping because it's got the trade routes from the Trans-Sahara. And so again, I'm expanding kind of southwards and trying to avoid this big blob for the moment. In 860, I formed an empire, a custom empire, which is going to be called Vaoiland after my house here, randomly generated dynasty. And so the plan is to continue into Spain and down into North Africa. By 868, though, what I've done is when I conquered the Canaries here, I gave it to this guy and then pressed his claim on a kingdom. So now I have the first vassal king under me, which is going to persist for quite a while until a few hundred years later than this, replace him with a mayor. And then my strategy was finally to start chipping away at this mega barbarian kingdom. So I took one vassal king off them, well, one for the moment vassal king, and it's going to be a mayor again, of course. But that was my strategy, and to try and break up this mega dangerous kingdom, because being tribes people, they can also do things like planned invasions and that sort of thing. So it's very important to kind of try and limit their growth and instead to get as many of those as vassals as you can. And so indeed, when a kid took over as king of this mega tribal kingdom, I'm able to press the claim of my existing queen vassal on them to try and again chip away more and more. I'm able to then siege him down. It's quite interesting again because of the randomized world and randomized cultures. You get to end up having elephants here in Europe as a native culture because you have elephant pens and that sort of thing here. But the main thing is that I'm chipping away at this mega kingdom, which is the biggest threat to me. And once I've consolidated this, I should be basically the largest single polity, and then expansion should be fairly easy. So by 885, that's largely been done, and I've taken over the mega tribal kingdom. That was mostly by having this queen firstly press her claims and then simply inheriting the remaining titles in a short spate of time. So now, while I do have a very powerful vassal that could be dangerous, if I hold on to it, I've effectively got most of this stuff on lock. The only problem now is that there's a bunch of tribal holdings, and so they need to reform into feudal. It has to be feudal, really. The AI doesn't reform into a merchant republic, unfortunately, or any kind of republic. They always go for feudal. But that's still better than having these tribes in terms of getting troops and money and things out of them. So from now on, it's a fairly straightforward expansion, and I get to choose where I go for. And so my thoughts were to go across the Mediterranean, somehow get through to India, because the largest remaining state here is the effectively the randomly generated HRE, or in this world the divine Ladakhi Empire here. That's my largest target now. It's all built up. There's no tribes there, so it's rich lands that I can use directly. I just have to get through some tribal territory here, but that then will be very useful. And so my aim was to chip away at this large Indian empire as soon as I could. Before that, though, I did some consolidation. More kingdoms have fallen. We have Utea falling, namely this world's Scotland, in 909. In 914, we've got a toehold over here in Africa, and we've still got our eyes eastward on the eastern Mediterranean. And by 935, I've got a major stranglehold over North Africa. And in particular, I'm trying to keep some more of these Saharan trade route posts. Overall, since I am a merchant republic, I'm trying to build up large trade zones. So I can show you the yellow ones here are mine. So I'm trying to build up an enormous trade zone from my capital here in Winchester. And I'm trying to snake it down here. So these are the coastal trade posts that allow you to expand your trade range, and they sort of buff all the cities along it. So All my cities get something like 50% extra tax simply because there's a massive transcontinental naval trade zone, which is great. And overall, I've still got my eyes on the east, so I'm expanding. I'm doing mostly holy wars and things like that. I'm fighting this guy who is of a different religion. He's got the flame one here as opposed to the anvil one, which I have. The steady expansion east continues. By 952, I've got a toehold over here in the eastern Mediterranean. I'm starting to implement my political reforms, which I've mentioned. So now I have some of my first actual prince mayors. This guy, for example, I've given him a kingdom and some vassals underneath him. And I've started to press even claims. This guy has a kingdom as well. I think I only part way through this realized that you can actually just, if you have a claimant, you can just give them a city directly. And then when you press their claim, they will be a mayor in charge of a kingdom. So I'm starting to now put the political endgame into play. By 953, I've got my first empress. So the way I'm choosing an heir is by simply looking at who the best kind of candidate is. So in a merchant republic, you can just simply select the one with the highest diplomacy, highest stewardship, that sort of thing, whatever you want. A young character, perhaps, so that you get to play with them for longer before having a succession, that sort of thing. So this Empress has pretty good stats. That's why I picked her. Another interesting tidbit mechanic. So when you choose the business focus, that gives a plus 20% to city vassal opinion, which normally, again, is just for little dinky mayors who have just a little city somewhere in your domain, like maybe this guy, he just has a single city, and okay, you get a 20% opinion boost, who cares? But of course, that 20 opinion boost does apply to my king level mayors, so it kind of shows you that these guys, they're interested in you doing business, being a businessman doing business, or a businesswoman, and they would rather trade and do things like that than have rebellions and infighting and civil wars and that sort of thing. By 966, I've directly conquered a kingdom, this kingdom as a republic immediately, by first giving this guy a city somewhere and then pressing his claim. So you can see I conquered it as a claimant, but he is a mayor. The other thing I've done since I reformed my own pagan sort of religion is that I've managed to vassalize a holy order. So now I get to have a fairly large stack for free. There's no monthly cost. Since I'm the only major person with this religion, I have the Holy War CB on everyone, and I get to have this stack of mercs effectively for free. I'm snaking down here in Arabia and also across through Mesopotamia, ideally, once again aiming for India. About 30 years later, and I've got a little toehold here. I'm fighting for some land here in Iran to sort of have a stopover, but I'm starting to get into this subcontinent, and indeed I've got this coastline. As you can see, there's some fracturing going on here. These guys, I think, got their independence, and so I'm trying to juggle truces, go for some of the smaller duchies and things like that if I can. Try and go for any sort of rebels that pop up. So this is a rebellion, so I'm trying to quickly take their land because I've got a truce with the main Divine Ladaki Empire here, I believe, or maybe not. Then I can go for this duchy over here, since I don't have a truce currently, and I'm also using a lot of mercs. I'm using retinues and that sort of thing, but I can start raising a few retinues as well. The Black Death happened earlier in this game than historically, so I've been waiting it out. And by 1009, it's largely gone away. It's just got the last pocket here. But it has sort of devastated the world, and I basically hunkered down and tried not to die while it was raging across. Now will take some time to recover the prosperity and that sort of thing, but at least that gets it out of the way. And I can resume the expansion here into India. In 1031, I've got some more of Central Europe, some of Anatolia, and I'm taking the time to press claims on a couple of kingdoms here, including this one here. It's quite a nice one with a lot of developed stuff, not tribal, and I'm waiting out some truces. Effectively, militarily, the rest of the countries don't form any sort of threat. We can see that at this point the hard bit of the campaign's done. I'm the largest single polity with the by far largest army. It's just now a matter of mopping up and trying to consolidate, trying to get a bunch of republics going and that sort of thing. In 1037 I have Africa consolidated into the Caucasus in 1044. By 1044, we've reached the eastern end of the map. Some of my vassals have also been expanding here into Scandinavia. That's nice of them, and further into Eastern Europe, even beyond the Carpathians here. In 1051, I'm fighting for this little duchy, but it turns out to be that this is about 100 years before I finish the actual world conquest part, so it's probably worthwhile sitting back and reviewing. So I've got a bunch of mayors as kings now, and I still have a bunch of normal feudal kings to remove. There's a lot of nomadic territories left to conquer still, so that's going to be quite frustrating just because it's low supplies and they have to be rebuilt into feudal eventually. It's worth also discussing invading China, which the last time I played wasn't an option in this game, but now you can sort of try and invade the Chinese Empire, which will then put one of your dynasty members basically on the throne. You'll be able to trade and so on and so forth. So it is technically possible. But I kind of made a mistake. I realized that they were going to attack from here in sort of north of the Himalayas. So I snaked my way, as I'll show, to here, and it kind of made it very difficult to invade China. It's actually better. What'll happen when you declare war for the first 2 years, if you don't have any holdings up here, they'll just sort of sit there with their armies. Of course, they don't take any attrition damage. They'll just have 130k sitting permanently on top of one of these counties. But then eventually they have a 50k stack that arrives down here by sea, effectively. So it's actually better, but I didn't know this at the time, to try and declare war on them here and basically camp them out and try and kill their 50 stack down here, 50k stack, which would effectively win the war straight away. But I'll show you how I did end up doing it, which was long and painful, unfortunately. So by 1067, I've snaked my way over here and I'm ready to invade China. It does require you to not have any raised levies, and also, I believe, not raised any holy orders and that sort of thing. So if I dismiss the holy order, I should be able to launch an invasion. I have to pick a character of mine to put on the throne there. But let's say we pick this one. And so when I launch the invasion, here they have 172k invading. Now the problem is this 172k is attrition free. So the most I can have here without attrition is 21k in this single county. And there's just simply no way that I can get enough troops anywhere near here to fight them fairly. So I have to effectively smoke them out to try and come down here through this Tarim Basin, through these Himalayan foothills, and down here into this river valley here, where there's enough supply limit that I can sort of box them in and attack them from all sides, simply because, again, the solution that the Paradox had is just to not give them any attrition. If I try to march, say, 300k through here, they would quickly attrit away down to like 20k. So, and I'd lose all my troops to attrition before I got into a fight. So the aim is to create a kind of semicircle here, ready to pounce upon the armies as they do. They will siege all the way down, and we'll eventually have to push them back and unsiege. Here they are, very slowly moving across and sieging. They won't come down for a fight until they have sieged absolutely everything here. Fortunately, they will lose some of those troops by launching assaults, and also even 100% sort of, or even occupation here won't cause me to lose. You just have to wait until you get into a fight. They can at most get 50% of the war score from occupation, so that doesn't matter. You'll just be at minus 50 until they get down here. I've now started, as you can see, having lots and lots of troops. If I could just get them into a fight, this would be an easy battle. 154k and maybe even more arriving. Plus a lot of them are my retinues, which are entirely pikes, so one-on-one we could beat them quite easily. It's just getting them down here for a fight. Finally, after 2 years, they're starting to get down here in the right direction. Once again, we're waiting for them. As soon as they come close, we'll be able to start attacking them. It's a real ballet dance to try and get into a battle here, such that I can then move my own I can move enough of my troops in and then move the troops out once we're done fighting. As you can see, one-on-one we win the battle very easily, but it's just if they can then get their massive stacks in, that's not going to be great, and then I'll take lots of attrition. So it's a kind of hit and run. We take a fair fight here, or a favorable fight, and then we retreat. Our commanders, so the commanders that they have, they're supposedly come out with good commanders. Okay, this guy is rubbish, but some of his other ones, okay, they have 22 martial. This guy only has 4, and he's leading an army. This guy has 5, and so on. My commanders, some of the best ones that I have, are 24, 23, and 21 martial, so I can handily outdo them in terms of command quality, but again, it's just not taking attrition is really the problem. And we have to back out because it's going to be winter soon, when the supply limits are going to fall even more, and we're just simply not going to be able to hold our troops here. So we have to, for years, chip away at their numbers. You can see we've taken down some of them, but we'll have to chip away before we can do a big counterattack all up here. By 1071, we've got them firmly on the ropes. They've lost about half of their troops. I did have a claimant spawn here, so I'm having to divert my troops away to fight this claimant that also has something like 30k troops. But overall, we're now just taking a lot of favorable fights. We're pursuing them when we can. And so we should easily be able to beat them here. Unfortunately, now I have to move this army to fight this claimant. I have to get enough quite to beat them, but I should have enough diverted away. The Chinese just have 70k left of their initial 100k or so. And I now have more reinforcements. Overall, I should be able to have 195k fully mobilized. Can always get some more mercenaries if need be, but that's easy enough. The problem with this claimant is I think that they can win this war without fighting battles, so I do need to stop them from sieging my stuff down quite quickly. But as you can see, China is now down to just 54k, which should be easy enough to beat. And by 1074, I'm finally on the march back, unsieging whatever has been sieged down. There was an epidemic that started, so I've had to shut the gates here. But we're finally getting this war in hand. Unfortunately, we can only win, even though we have way over 100% battles. The minus 50% occupation still counting against us, so we have to unsiege absolutely everything that they've sieged down in order to win this war formally. But now with their armies, we should be winning. They only have 11k, which is nothing, and our troops will make short work of them. And so by 1076, 9 years after I started this, I finally got them unsieged. They've got a tiny little stack here, or 2 stacks technically, and I can finally piece them out. And bam, a new dragon rises. We have our guy on the throne finally. That's going to give us a lot of boon with them. We can start trading and have lots of trade agreements and so on and so forth. Got a rebellion here, that's easy. And so finally, after 9 years of fighting China, we're still under lockdown because there's still an epidemic here in our homelands, but we're finally ready to start expanding again and finish this world conquest. By 1080, the actual biggest opponent now is this kingdom here, which just simply has the most duchies. Since we're doing religious CBs on them, we're taking duchy by duchy, and so it's going to take us time to chip away at this large consolidated kingdom. The rest are actually pretty easy, and there's a lot of border gore here in Europe, but that just means we can take things much more easily. And our vassals are still expanding eastward somewhat. So by 1090, what I've begun to do is start focusing inwards again, as well as conquering outwards. And so what I've done is I've launched, I'm fighting the Divine Ladakhi Empire again for another duchy. But I've also started to try arrest some of these kings to, remember, take away the kingdom titles and give them to a mayor somewhere. So I've got 2 kings currently revolting, which is great. You want to try and fail to arrest them, which lets you fight them in a war and eventually revoke their titles and so on. So I'm moving in now to siege them down, fight their armies, but now this is very easy at this stage with so many retinues and so many other levies that it should be just straightforward to revoke the kingdoms as necessary. By 1092, I've got multi-front wars going, so I'm going for some of these nomads here. I've got a war going here in the far east. I'm getting attacked here in my capital, but that's fine. I've got some troops there because they always seem to go and sail up to your capital, so that's fine. So we're now really pushing forward. We've got less than 60 years to go to finish off the rest of this border gore, basically. Even more wars in 1093. Lots of nomads, lots of little tribal enclaves and things like that. By this point, the game is running very slowly indeed. My court is quite large with 422 members out of an ideal number of 55. So the game is really, really chugging. I'm missing the days of the first 100 years or so when the FPS was actually smooth. Now this is running very, very slowly. I've just finished with a conquest, so I have to hand out lands because I've got too many holdings for my domain. So what I usually typically do is I create new vassals for the lower level holdings, which will just make someone of your culture and religion, I believe, hold that. So if you just create new vassal, this guy is the same culture and religion. For the lower level holdings and for the higher ones, I split them out amongst my prince mayors and things like that. What ends up taking a long time when managing a large empire like this, and it's may or may not be the optimal way to play, but it certainly is a suboptimal way in terms of just taking ages, is I like to have all of my dynasty members married if I can, and creating further dynasty members, and I'll marry the women off matrilineally. So right now my dynasty has 1,000 members and I'm trying to maximize that. So in order to do that, I'm looking for all of the unmarried, certainly people in my court. If there's female members, I'll invite them. With a merchant republic, you end up losing a lot of money if you have male members of your dynasty at court. So this guy, for example, once I marry him off, I'll arrange a marriage here. And I'll just find any suitable candidate who's not part of my dynasty, but I may not have many of them. But let's say this one. So I'll marry him off, and then I'll ask him to leave court because he's actually costing me a lot of money at court because of how merchant republics work. You basically have to split up all your income amongst your male members. But so a lot of the game then takes is simply in order to have the candidates to marry these guys off, what I ended up doing is just looking for any young characters not of my dynasty and just blanketly inviting them all to court. There's kind of a pretty rubbish interface for it. You can see also female members that aren't of my dynasty that aren't in my court, I'll invite as well. And so basically every few years I have to find any adults and go through all the list of adults, see any that are, if you have this little hand icon, it means that if you bribe them, then they'll come over. So let's say this character, not the best stats ever, but if I send her a gift, then I can invite her to court and then marry her off to, again, one of my dynasty members. Same here, send gift, invite to court, and you're basically doing that hundreds and hundreds of times, which is what takes so long. You invite them to court, then we'll wait here, and eventually she should, this one accepted, and yes, this lady accepted, and now I can marry her off. I do that for men as well, and marry off the female dynasty members matrilineally, as I say, just to maximize the dynasty size. Let's search court here. So arrange marriage, matrilineal, find a suitable young fellow who's not in my dynasty, and there we go. And she can stay in court because the women don't cost you a proportion of your income, unlike the men. So big court, big dynasty. That I think is a fairly optimal way to play, but it does just make games take absolutely ages. It's 1101, which just happens to be 50 years before I finish the world conquest part of this. And now I am fighting mostly nomads. You can see that the territory I have to take over is largely nomadic still. There are a few feudal kingdoms left and an Icta kingdom. This is probably the biggest one over here that need to be conquered still. But I'm largely fighting nomads, which, if you're not familiar with the game, when you as a settled person conquer a nomadic county, what will happen is you get this nomad agitation modifier. So down here it tells it's nomad agitation, and if you don't build a city or a castle there by the time you have a succession, you could lose it and the nomads reoccupy it. So I've been diligently building cities. Here's a city under construction here and everywhere else that I've just taken over. And so that's good. So I'm trying to secure them quickly. But then the idea would be, see, when you conquer it, I'll find an example here like Opava. I've conquered this off nomads. There's still the nomad agitation for the next 100 years. And a tribe's been built. I've built a city to secure it. But what we ideally would have is the tribe would get converted to a castle, and then a bishopric also would be built. So to do that, you've got to build up the hill fort level to the highest possible level, and then hopefully this tribal guy will eventually adopt feudalism. That's been happening. If you remember at the start of the game, we've had basically all of modern France and Germany were tribal. That's also been happening here. So now we have castles here and cities and various other advanced government types. In some cases, hopefully some mayors as well. In order to achieve my goal of having the most advanced possible world left by the end of the campaign, I've been trying to push the tech development as well. I've built a number of the great works. So mostly I've been trying to build a lot of grand universities. In my capital here, I've got a grand university being built, and around, there's a few other ones that I'm building up. The regular universities in the city I've been trying to level up as well. That gives you tech points. And then you can spread the tech. So just to show you, for instance, something like, what do I have? So say construction, for instance. I'm spreading it. My capital has the highest construction tech level, but then other places in the world are getting it, so I'm trying to spread it. Over here, the nomadic lands, no surprise, are the lowest in tech in the game, and they will need some tech spread there as well. Another little quirky thing that I've done here is I've built, the first actual great work that I built is this grand garden, because there what you're able to do is build a fountain of youth. If you have the fantastic events on, you can do things like become immortal maybe, or build the fountain of youth where every 10 years you can drink from the fountain of youth to become 2 years younger, so you're able to live for longer as your character. I dedicated one of my characters specifically to become a mystic to be able to build this. So overall development is going well, I would say. I mentioned that my first expansion was eastward, south and then east, and then north from India into the Tarim Basin and that sort of thing. My expansion now is sort of northwards. You can see I'm taking quite an indirect route here. I'm not keeping my holdings too close together, because what I'm trying to do is trying to get as much surface area on all these map gore nomads. So for example, I'm trying to get a border with these guys so I can war deck them, trying to get a border with these guys so I can war deck them, and so on. So I'm trying to take little bits and pieces here and there to increase my surface area on all of these guys so that I can just keep declaring wars. Here's a rare time where I've peaced out and I'm about to start war decking some more. I've just built up some more cities and that sort of thing in the nomad lands. And we have had, in some places at least, we've had people, I think this one, people start to adopt feudalism in previously conquered nomad lands. lots of wars again, and I've used my increased surface area, as I say, to try and expand in all directions and keep lots of wars going simultaneously. I tend to spread out my conquests among the vassals, particularly the Republic vassals, so that I can then raise armies pretty much anywhere. With this large an empire, it's annoying because now there are a ton of uprisings all the time, so you've just got to play whack-a-mole with the rebellions, but not so bad because they're quite easy to beat. I guess I could have put the difficulty up, but this is default, so straightforward enough to beat. It's 11:16, and from now on I'm trying to very consciously and deliberately revoke kingdom level titles from actual kings. So I'm fighting a couple of wars to try and arrest this king and replace him with a mayor, and this guy as well. Once those two are done, I will have a few kings left. There'll be this guy and a few others, but largely I have a bunch of prince mayors in charge, which is of course what I'm going for. So I'm trying to revoke and provoke the various kings. I'm trying to spy on them sometimes. I'm looking for any plots that they might be involved in or any other opportunity to arrest them. It's very likely if you try and arrest a king level vassal that they will try and revolt, which is great because that's the way that you can revoke their titles, is if they revolt, they become a traitor and you revoke from them. So here I've finally got 100 war score on one of the kings, so I will enforce the demands and of course revoke the king level title and as many of the other titles if I can. But the problem when you do that is you have an enormous vassal explosion. As you can see, I'm now way over the limit because all of the vassals that were under him I've now got. I will need to give the title away to someone. But even then, the problem is with these guys, there's such a patchwork of vassals that I can't directly give away all of the vassals to another mayor straight away. There'll be some that need to be given, like this guy, this duke is de jure part of this kingdom, so with dukes you can only give them to the de jure king, so I have to give this mayor some of those dukes. Is there another one? Yes, the Duchess of Pomerania here, for example. So every time you revoke a kingdom, you do have to kind of play whack-a-mole with the vassals in this big vassal explosion. You have to give them away quickly because there's big penalties for that. And I'm severely over the limit here, almost double my limit of vassals. I am slightly over the domain limit. I'll explain why that is in a few years, but 1 or 2 over the domain limit is not so bad. I'm skipping ahead now to 1130. I've just been continuing, as you can see, consolidating this Eastern Europe here, taking away the nomad lands. Mostly it's done. What I've done for the first time in this run, I usually don't go for the intrigue focus. I know some people do that play this game, but I've gone for the intrigue focus, which will allow me firstly to spy on my king vassals, because there's still a few kings left that I want to revoke their title, I believe. And secondly, the truce timers with this particular kingdom are getting way too long, since by now there are no real military threats left. There's a small number of independent states only, and I am over 10 times the size of the next largest army. But it's just having a truce every time you conquer one duchy, since I can only launch religious wars at this guy. I have to conquer duchy by duchy. So Barkul here, Iqbogd, Karakotum, each will take one war, and there's a 5-year truce. So for the first time, what I've started doing is to try and assassinate this king when we have a truce with him, in order to then that the truce is not with the nation but with the king in this game. So assassinating a king will reset the truce, and you can then go to war with the next king that's elected or inherits. Other than that, I'm still continuing. So there's two reasons to take the intrigue focus. Firstly, for assassinating kings and spying on my own kings to try and arrest them. At this point, the game is running really slowly. I miss the days when I just loaded in just now into the start of the game, back when I wasn't even a Merchant Republic. The game was running buttery smooth. Now, you know, my computer's reasonable, but with just so many counts and such large courts everywhere, it's running absolutely slowly. There's also a ton of notifications with all my vassals having their birthdays and whatnot, children being born, that sort of thing. It's running very, very slowly, and so this was actually, by the end, quite a painful playthrough. Now, by 1134, it's interesting. Technically, Great Holy Wars have been unlocked, although it's basically pointless since there's no other religious bloc that's able to oppose me. And as I mentioned, I picked the autonomous pagan reform, which means we can't have Great Holy Wars since there's no pope or anyone to call one. But the other thing that's happened is a bunch of holy orders for the other religions have spawned. I am this anvil pagan religion, but these guys here, this is a holy order for the guy with beard religion. What is that? I think it's the Orthodox reskin here, I think, because they've got a patriarch, so I think it's the Orthodox reskin is this like bearded dude. And they've got this holy order. This holy order has built a barony in my lands, so I'm having to siege it down here. And we can peace out there. But yeah, lots of these little holy orders are popping up. Now what I'm doing, I am over the domain limit. Occasionally I'll make I won't touch this one, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to also, as much as I can, delete as many tribes as I can. So we've got loads of tribal vassals now, simply because when you conquer a nomadic territory, it becomes a tribe. In some cases, fortunately, I've had them adopt feudalism. That's great. This is one example. For instance, this is nomad agitation. So there would have been a tribe here, and then this countess would have probably adopted feudalism and upgraded. You can see all of her holdings to castles. That's great. The problem is that sometimes, this is a very annoying part of CK2, is you can get the situation, I think I'll find it here, you can get the situation where the tribe is not the primary holding. So then this guy, because he's only a baron tribe, a baron chief, he's not going to upgrade his holding. So fully getting rid of tribes is just a nightmare, and there's some left over, but that's what I'm trying to do. And so I'm trying to manually, let's see an example, Vasme here, for example. I'm holding on to this. Firstly, I'm using this, when you have the domain, it allows text spread very quickly. So we've got text spreading. Again, if I just show you trade practice or something, we've got text spreading here very, very quickly. We've got, the UI is not great, but yeah, you've got a whopping 60% chance to increase the tech level by 0.1, which is actually very high for this game. So hopefully, if I hold this as part of my domain, tech will spread very quickly. And in other places, I am trying to demolish tribes and build over them myself. So I think here I am demolishing this tribe, maybe, and trying to build a non-tribal holding instead. 1143, and we've got way more wars going again, a bunch of rebellions, a bunch of wars of conquest. What I'm trying to do then is I'm also holding Moskva here, the county of level for Moscow. Of course, in this time period, even in the real world, it's absolutely insignificant, but what I am trying to do is build up cities, and you see if I build a city and a castle, then I can destroy this tribe, and so have one fewer tribes left. Again, by holding this as my domain, it's tech spreading to here, which is good. Another holy order has gotten a whole county level here, but that's okay. I'll siege it down. And I can probably peace out then with them. Or it needs a second thing to be assaulted, I guess. But anyway, continuing to expand, as you can see, mostly there now, just a few more pockets to be conquered here and there. 1148, just 3 years until I ended up conquering the rest of the sovereign states. This king, I can show you, is the product of my campaign to assassinate in order to reset truces. So you can see died under suspicious circumstances, died under suspicious circumstances, died under suspicious circumstances, etc., etc. And so I've been whittling this down with its many duchies, as I mentioned, duchy by duchy, much quickly than I normally would if I had to wait for each truce to expire. I could have truce broken, I guess, but also just assassinating the kings was fun. Now, at this point, I have a problem with the HRE equivalent, the Divine Ladakhi Empire. That's, again, an elective version of the HRE that's been randomly generated for this game. The problem is, whenever I take something off this ruler, he seems to... First, he has a bunch of baronies. You can see he's an emperor. He holds an empire title, and below that, he only holds baronies, which is quite the contrast there. But it seems whenever I take his last barony, he just automatically revokes one from one of his vassals and remains an emperor still. So it's been a bit of a game of whack-a-mole with this guy, and I'm luckily also getting my vassals themselves to occasionally chop bits off him. So, for example, he's defending against 2 of my vassals as well as me at the moment. In that situation, it's basically best to, like me personally, since I have the much larger army, to just whittle down his army and let my vassals siege whatever they want to siege, and then hopefully they'll peace out. Try and catch his army on the march here. We'll move everyone here, assign the best commanders we can. In 1151, what ended up happening is the last holding of the Divine Ladakhi Empire, that one that I showed you, was finally taken by one of my vassals. This finally, fortunately, ended up destroying the empire title. And so what ended up happening, if I show you the ledger, all the little vassal barons, it was only baron levels that were left, have sort of exploded out and now become independent baronies over here. So I can go through and I can basically war deck all of these independently and siege them all down pretty much simultaneously once I can. I've just got a revolt to put down. But once this revolt is destroyed and I lower my levies once again, I can war deck all of those individual baronies and finally be the last remaining sovereign state. The game is absolutely chugging at this stage. Now that I finally declared war, I can just go through and raise a stack on top of each of these little baronies, and then hopefully we'll be able to siege them down. So that's a stack on top of each of them, except for here where I couldn't raise a stack directly, so I'll just sail one over, and so we'll let those sieges run. It's 1151 still, and I finally siege down the last barony to be conquered. There has been another revolt popped, as there always does, but all I can do now is peace out here. And then if we go back to ledger, I'm now the last sovereign state in effectively Eurasia and North Africa. So that's the world conquest part done. This was one of the last saves I had. So what I was planning on doing is waiting until the 13th century, when historically you get the Mongol invasion, and if you enable it, which I did, the sunset invasion, the Aztecs coming over. Actually, I had a look. I enabled this at game start, but for some reason, with this custom world, it disables those rules for some reason. The Aztec invasion got switched off. I even tried modding the save file to try and re-enable the Mongol invasion and the sunset invasion, but it just seems to overwrite it straight away. So what I was going to wait till 1200, but I kind of had enough with this playthrough. It's running so slowly, so I thought I'd fight off the two invasions, the Mongols and the Aztecs, a bit early here, just in 1151, now that I've finished. So the way I found is you can have a custom command. So if we do, what is it? Is it event 60500? Then we get the Mongol invasion here in the east. And if we do event SSI.1, we get odd-looking strangers and ships, so I think a 2-year countdown or something on the Aztecs invading as well. So we've got to start fighting the Mongols now with their stacks. They have only 10k or 100k here, but I think they get a few more or something later, and eventually the Aztecs will arrive. So I'll try and play this out, but edit it down, since, as I say, this takes an absolute age and a half to run. What we'll start doing is moving my retinues. I haven't talked about these. I have mostly these sort of stacks of 4.2k pikemen and archers, the pikeman style retinue, which is probably one of the strongest. And certainly it's on theme for cities as well, because in a city in this you get pikemen, and the archers are supposed to be crossbowmen, by the way, as well, or in part. So it's basically early pike and shot, which is kind of flavorful because that's what you'd probably get in a city. And so we'll start moving all of them now to fight the Mongols. The Aztecs should be dead easy. We'll just mobilize my vassals' levies and fight them in the sea. I'll also mobilize here some mercs. Finally, I'll start raising some small numbers of vassal levies here. The real problem is that this 100k that Genghis Khan has is completely attrition free. So they can have, let's say here, over 46k on this one tile, 49 in fact. Now for me, I can put 13k there. And if I try and put 45k on here directly, it's going to attrition my troops away almost instantly unless they're in battle. So that kind of sucks, and it makes fighting these guys very hard. The fact that they have attrition-free mega stacks does make it very difficult. They'll be able to siege down this land, and I can't do anything about it to start with. It's going to be a lot like fighting the sort of invading China was here, the Chinese armies, that they're also attrition free. And so I have to kind of wait for them, try and lure them into engagement, wait until summer, so there's a much higher supply cap in the summer months. The cap is higher on each of the holdings, so fight in summer, take little bites and nibbles off of their army until it gets whittled down to very small. Sure enough, they've begun to siege down my holdings, but that's okay. And I think they did hire a merc stack which can take... Yes, they've got a hired stack which can take attrition damage, fortunately. So the only way to watch this back was to go on 5x speed and narrate this in post-production. So there's just way too many kids having birthdays and education focuses and rebellions, as you're seeing 2 of them, and now a 3rd one going down. Overall, I'm moving my retinues in to try and force a first engagement. The good news is that the Mongols won't be able to win outright until 3 years have passed, even if they have 100% siege war score. So we just need to win an engagement, and then they just will not be able to win the war, and we'll just be able to continue a war until we whittle down to 0 manpower exactly. So we're trying to force a favorable engagement. As soon as they're moving on us, we're going to assign our best commanders. You'll see that being assigned in a moment. Still have to be very mindful of the supply limits in all of these counties. We can't put more than, probably about 19k unless there's a battle going on. So there you go. We're committed to a battle here. We've assigned the commanders. We've got some more rebellions that I've got to go and divert to. But overall, we are now converging on this battle here. So let's try and win this. We got some reinforcements just in time, and there you go. We chunked it. What you'll see, due to the way that Mongols fight, the light cavalry with horse archers and so on, is they will be doing a lot of morale damage at the start in the skirmishing phase, but once our troops close, then it should be fine, and we'll start doing the damage to them. As long as we have good commanders and locally outnumber them, or at least match them, then that's fine. So there we go. You can see that little skull icon means that we are taking attrition damage there. I'm starbursting out. That's my term for when you just move your armies into all the neighboring counties. Got a little annoying revolt there as well, popping in the north. There you go. Now we're converging again. We've moved out. We're reconverging on that county. It's really a ballet dance that we have to do. I think we've got about 3 revolts going at the same time. Are we going to win this one as well, this battle? Hopefully. More revolts. We've put one down, 4 popped up. That's annoying. But this battle itself, we are actually losing here. So I'm trying to reinforce. I think I didn't have my correct commanders, even though we did outnumber the Mongols there, which was annoying. So we will take a small loss there. And indeed, fortunately, we still have a positive occupation. You can see we're just 1% from being able, basically 1% from being capped out. But luckily, we're just about, if we don't lose another battle, we won't actually lose the full war. So we've got to absolutely make sure we win the next battle. And until they win another battle, the Mongols they will not be able to cap us out. So that's okay. I'm dismissing the levies. That after that battle, a lot of the levies that I raised were severely depleted. So we're going to have to wait for them to recover. The retinues will recover on their own fairly quickly, but not too quickly. And again, we're taking a lot of attrition damage. Most of my levies aren't even in play yet, so that's good. Yeah, there you go. Mongols are still, fortunately, their AI is just content to keep sieging me down, even though it is completely pointless for them, since it won't add any war score at this point. Again, you can see lots of rebellions, lots of invitations to the Hermetic Society. We've got adultery going on in the court, which of course is enough to distract me away from fighting the invading hordes and that sort of thing. More revolts. Meanwhile, again, I'm doing a fine ballet here. Well, fortunately, that revolt was just on our way anyway. But I'm doing a fine ballet, finding the counties which have good supply. Some of these ones with the river passing through in this Tarim Basin, or at the top of the Tarim Basin, I'm not entirely sure. You see they're now being lured out again slightly, which is nice. If we force another battle on Juyan, we'll probably assault the holding there just real quick. Again, more adultery going on, but let's commit to an engagement. Let's force some commanders now. And again, moving the troops in. Right, there's a favorable engagement. It looks like, again, we will lose a lot of morale to start with, but once the battle is in the engagement phase, then we should be able to do a lot of damage. Just continuously nibbling and nibbling away. It's now been, I think, 2 years since we triggered the Mongol invasion, or, just under 2 years. Still more revolts, but there you go. And look at that. That is a fat stack that is going to cause a lot of attrition, unfortunately, there. Not much we can do about that, though. Again, operating in the months of summer. So you'll see me pull back now. It's August, September, so now it is going to start to be winter, and it's going to be lower supply caps everywhere. Now, during all this, I was waiting for the Aztecs to arrive, but they never seem to. I think the triggers are somehow wrong, even though I tried all of the events that are supposed to lead the Aztecs to invade. Couldn't manage it. Let's force some more engagements here now. So it looks like they'll be attacking this 12,600 stack, but we'll snipe one of the stacks on the way, and we'll overall, yeah, there you go. Both the sets of stacks were victorious. So again, the Mongols now getting severely weakened. I'm dismissing where I can the levies so that they don't cost supply, and I am then starbursting out. China is still our dynasty, fortunately. That's fine. They don't seem to be getting invaded, so that's lucky. More kids to tutor, as always, and more revolts to put down. That's what this game's all about. If only there were just some way to suppress it. And lots of infidelity happening in my court. I'm just saying I don't care. I don't care if they're adulterous or whatever. I think now the levies have begun to be refilled, so that big L that we took, that single battle that we lost, we're now starting to refill the levies should we need to mobilize them again. And the retinues here, I keep stacks of 4,200 at a time, so they are also filling back in. It's July, but the Mongols are just too far north. I don't feel that I can advance too far further north this year. We don't want to get stuck in this sort of eastern Siberia, whatever this region is, with Karakorum and so on. But if one of them will come out, now that we've sieged stuff down, hopefully we'll be able to catch it. Yeah, there we go. I've caught another stack. Should do some damage. Of course, these non-attritional stacks cannot be reinforced. So there's Temujin is leading some troops, so that's going to be a tough stack to fight. They don't always send the stack with Temujin forward, although I suppose if he loses, maybe he could be incapacitated and killed. I guess that would be bad for the invasion. Now here what I'm trying to do is fire some of the Sunset Invasion Aztec events, but again they're not quite working, which is annoying. I'm just trying every single one, but I guess the triggers have to be correct in some way. I'm not sure if it's the year or the fact that, I mean, some of these like kingdoms don't exist. Maybe it goes off for like a specific kingdom, like England or something that has to be invaded. Of course, none of the kingdoms are real. So another year, another winter, and it's about to be now the summer of 1155, at least supply-wise. That's a free 5k gold I got there, apparently, whatever. That's nice, I guess. Money-wise, I think even though we're taking some losses and got some mercs in the field, we're pretty stable on the money, 266k. finally, again, we're moving in. Oh, this is so that is all my rivals. I've got about a page full of rivals there, due to the fact that I'm educating the kids to be ambitious, so it makes them into your rivals. Still think that's worth it though. And we're going to force another engagement here. Assign commanders to that snack that's there exposed, and filter in all the troops that we can. Good news is they don't take attrition damage while they're fighting battles, so the Mongols can, feed as many troops as they like. We're only too happy to fight them. All of my retinues are now deployed here, so we will be able to take good battles here. This, I've noticed that I need to put some more money in the campaign fund to basically be able to rig the elections better, because one of the other great families in this merchant republic was threatening to actually win the succession election. And again, I'm trying a few more of these. Again, I can't really pass that logic, like, yeah. I'm not sure what exactly isn't working about the Sunset Invasion and this sort of randomized world. Although we do now have some Nahua, i.e. Aztec characters. We could even convert to that and perhaps even reform the Nahua religion if we really wanted to. I don't particularly want to, but we could use that as well. We've got all the holy sites, of course. Got some random vassal army off to siege down that province there. The one without the numbers, that's just a vassal, I don't know, waging war on someone internally. Another fat battle going on here, that's fine. Yep. That's them getting ground down. So this should be the beginning of the end. It's perhaps not the end, but it is the beginning of the end. To paraphrase Churchill there. We're going to start sieging a few more of these down. Sieging them is good. It means that it'll lure the Mongols back to siege it again. We've got an epidemic near our capital, so we just better be careful. Now what I'm doing, we've got a free 10k gold or whatever, but now what I'm doing is I'm raising the vassals' armies to start sieging down there as well. We're now going to start sort of squashing in the Mongols there. We're also just taking time to upgrade the different universities, grand universities we're building, and maybe some more stuff. More revolts as usual here in northern Archangel or whatever it is. We're really starting to whittle down the Mongols now. They must only have, about 30k, if that. And so now we will just start counter-sieging. That's me drinking from the Fountain of Youth, and my age went from 65 to 63. Can't do that too often though, but every, I think it's 10 years you get to drink that, so a bit of a life extension there. Right, starting to counter siege now strongly, and again taking some good fights. He's down to 15k there, Temujin is. Yeah, 15k, you can basically see them. They've got 2 stacks. We don't have enough to enforce demands, but what we want to do is we want to completely kill off all of Temujin's troops there, so no hordes left. And give them no territory to be able to raise new troops from either. So more retinues coming in, more assaults on partially occupied holding. Some of these, now it's February, some of the supply limits are just an absolute joke, like 3k in some places, and these, the Mongols getting away with like 30k. I don't mind them having a slight advantage. I mean, I was thinking about this historically. Okay, so the Mongols are good because they've got their sort of sheep and horses that basically can eat hay, and then they get milk and so on, so they can live off the land much better. But there's a limit to that. I mean, they still need to get hay for all their horses. You can't just have an arbitrarily large horde of horses. And also, unlike the real history, this part of Siberia here is very settled. There's lots of castles and cities and so on, and I think the defenders, if they wanted to, they could go and burn all the grass and stuff and really limit the Mongols' ability to fight. So attrition-free stacks, not exactly fair. Coming to the end of it now, they've got just a couple of small stacks left. Last couple of stack wipes. Okay, and there we go. Now Temujin has exactly 0 troops. I can enforce demands on him. That's the Mongols beaten. I cannot, for some reason, get the Aztecs to spawn, but I theoretically could beat them if I could. I think I've got enough levies and things like that, and I could hire mercs. So I was going to play this out to 1453, but this is just running too slowly and becoming too frustrating for my liking. I could have kept pushing tech, so I've got plenty of tech points that I can spend, and then build universities, build up cities, and so on. But I'm going to leave it here and save that there. I think I've done a reasonable job in succeeding with what I wanted to do. I've got a very advanced, highly economically developed and technologically well built up sort of area. My empire through North Africa, Europe, and Asia is quite successful. I've got good relations with China because I invaded them and put my dynasty member on the throne. So there's just one last thing to say, which is how one might play a similar campaign in the historical 769 start. And there are a couple of ideas. So looking at the map in 769 historically, if you remember, I started as tribal and reformed into Merchant Republic, which is, I think, the way to go. So we could, of course, take one of the Scandinavian duchies, perhaps Sweden or something like that, conquer, perhaps go for the British Isles after you've consolidated your main starting area, maybe take some of Northern Europe, and then do a world conquest from there. We would then, of course, reform the Norse religion with exactly the same way as I did, or perhaps slightly differently, depending on what you think constitutes being an advanced society. But in any case, we have the Norse religion there to reform. I forget the exact location of all the holy sites, but if we take this one, and this one here, perhaps we can reform something like that. But there is a more interesting start that requires a bit of a modding. So if we start here as Kiev, so loading into game as historic Kiev, we are tribal indeed. The problem is that while we're on the Dnipro River, you're not allowed to form a merchant republic unless you're specifically on a coastal tile, which it doesn't count major rivers as coastal, but it should be fairly straightforward for me to mod this to basically make the Dnipro all coast or all sea. If this is all sea, then we could reform, with Kiev being the capital of a merchant republic. And so we could do that. Of course, we are at the start here Slavic, which is fine. Again, that can be reformed potentially in the way that I suggested. So we'd go for cosmopolitan again, we go for equality and so on. But there's an even more interesting possibility, which is we could actually invite and marry. I believe it should be possible to marry and then convert to someone of the Hellenic religion, though I may be crazy here. That's Hindu. What about... Yes. So theoretically, I could invite... Maybe I could try and buy a favor from this guy, invite him and marry him. He is Hellenic, and so we could then marry a Hellenic guy, convert the whole nation to Hellenic, and reform the Hellenic religion, which would be quite interesting. So a slightly modded game. Now I was playing this unmodded, but a slightly modded game to make the Dnipro into a sea, and then a reformed Hellenic Kievan merchant republic playthrough. That's interesting. If this video does well, maybe I will do a live stream or something of that. I'll see how far I can get. Certainly I don't want to play into the 1100s again, because the game just runs so slowly. You can see here, just panning the map, much faster in this early times than it was in 1151. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching, etc.